So I pursue a rather strange occupation. We call it being a modeler. And so my job is to figure out how highly successful people do what they do and figure out ways to transfer those abilities to other people. And modeling is the process through which NLP was created in the first place. So there's nothing new about NLP. It's simply finding what highly successful communicators actually do and figuring out ways to transfer those abilities to other people. So the great thing about modeling is you get to meet some amazing people that are able to do amazing things. And you get to find out what human beings are really capable of. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the modeling process. Basically, I have an understanding of human psychology and of the way that we represent the world outside, inside, and that determines how we're able to perform and what we're able to do. And so it's fairly sophisticated. And the question I'm always asking is, how do you do that? Not what do you do, but how do you do it? Not why do you do it? Why is a bad question, because you get rationalizations, justifications, and excuses. Whereas how is a totally different question, because if we can figure out how, then we can begin to figure out how to do it ourselves. So there's a slogan, possible in the world, possible for me, only a matter of how, and how many reincarnations it may take in order to get the basic building blocks in place. So I'm just going to give a few examples of some of the modeling projects and some of the lessons learned from them. And then this afternoon, then Joe and I will be going into some specific areas about what we call human typological analysis, the science of human types, that will allow you to tailor what you're doing to the client you're communicating with. So I started working with modeling. I was a civilian employee of the Department of the Army, and I convinced a very bright general that we could improve training in the Army, and most training is based on somebody's theory of what works, whereas modeling trainings are based on what actual performers actually do. Now, frequently the people that do these trainings that run around then, that are so-called experts, are teaching you how they did. Well, first, they don't know how they did what they did, because experts operate out of unconscious competence. They don't know how they do what they do. And they may have a theory about it, and the theory usually has little or nothing to do with how they actually do it. And you may say, well, that's a pretty bold statement. And the evidence for that is that most of their students are not as good as they are. If they knew how they did what they did, and they were able to transfer it to other people, then they would create other people that could do what they can do. And that's seldom the case. In fact, they don't want other people usually to be able to do what they do. So even if they are transferring it, they keep some secrets back. So I was a civilian employee of the Department of the Army, and we decided, I convinced the general, that we could use modeling technology then to improve training in the Army. So we selected some projects to work on, and one of the first was marksmanship. So one of the most basic functions a soldier has, you issue him a rifle, and his job is to go out and use it to kill the enemy. So in order to train the soldier to do that, then they go through a marksmanship training program In the Army, it's at Fort Benning, Georgia, and the one-step unit training. And a drill sergeant comes out and trains the people then how to shoot a rifle or how to shoot a pistol. So we first started with pistol shooting. And we went through a lot of challenges getting access to the top pistol shooters, who were the ones we wanted to model. So we went down to Fort Benning to model them. And as we pulled into the post, we noticed on the cars that we passed that they all had a bumper sticker that read, "Shit happens." Well, that was the first tip-off that there were going to be challenges, because that's a universal reframe and a universal excuse. So if you believe that shit happens, then you've already got a rationalization, justification, excuse for failure. So in any case, we modeled the top pistol shooters in the Army, and we came up with a training program, and we wanted to do a test. So we had the standard Army pistol training was a 4-day training, and so taught by the marksmanship units. So we had the marksmanship unit do a test group, and then we, being myself and one other person then, did the test on using what we had modeled as far as how people shoot. So we did several things different than the standard training. First, we called it the expert training, because we weren't interested in simply qualifying. We wanted people to be expert shooters. So how you label it makes a big difference in people's understanding. The second thing we did is normally you start with the target all the way from here to almost the back of the room. And you shoot 45 shots, and you go down and you look at the target, and there's some shots right in holes in the middle, and then there's holes all around it, and you start counting up the holes, and there are less holes than shots. So some of your shots didn't even hit the paper, and you got no idea which shot went where. So it's like, oh my God, I did something wrong. So you change something. But since you don't know what you were doing right and what you were doing wrong, then it's a random process that some of the things you were doing right, now you stop doing. Some of the things maybe you're doing wrong, you start doing. And it's a wonder anybody ever learns to shoot as a result of the process. So one of the lessons is that you want to provide direct feedback if you want to train the unconscious mind. So you don't consciously shoot at an expert level, you unconsciously shoot. And if you want to train the unconscious, you need to provide a source of immediate feedback. Normally what happens is we get delayed feedback. So in school, you would get your test back with red marks all over it like it had bled to death, and then you go, oh my God, I did something wrong. But at that point, it's too late. There's nothing you can do about it. Whereas if you can provide a source of immediate feedback, you can begin to train the unconscious. So the first thing we did is we brought the target up from here to there. So when you shot, you could see where the bullet went. And then we gradually moved it back at a rate where you could qualify at every intermediate distance. So when you got it all the way down range, you'd already qualified at 4 or 5 steps in between. So you want to, general rule, you want to start at a level at which it's impossible to fail, and then to increase the level of difficulty. Start at a level that's impossible to fail, and then increase the level of difficulty. So Thank you. So we went through the process, the training. So the first thing we did is we had talked to a bunch of the recruits to find out what they already thought about shooting, what they had heard, because what's in your mind is going to make a major difference. So what we called disenabling beliefs. Disenabling beliefs are any rationalization, justification, or excuse for failure. And they had several disenabling beliefs. One, the gun was inaccurate. Two, it was unreliable. It would jam on you. Three, it would make a loud noise that would cause permanent hearing loss. And four, that when you pull the trigger, it would kick and it would physically hurt you. So if you believe any of those things, then you've already got an excuse ahead of time why you're not going to be successful. So you got to find out what the disenabling beliefs are, and you got to blow out the disenabling beliefs. The best way to do that is what we called a personally enabling reference experience. So the first thing we did is we'd had all of the guns tested to make sure they would shoot factory specs. We had them on a table. We had one of the trainees select 3 of them at random, and then we put them in a bench vise and showed that they would shoot the factory specs, so they were accurate. Then we had somebody over to the side that was shooting the gun, and while we were carrying on instruction, while we're talking, and they were shooting for over an hour, and it never jammed once, so the gun is reliable. Now then, we had them put on double hearing protection, and we had them stand right near us when we pulled the trigger, and they realized that it was just a pop and the sound was not a problem. So then the last thing was, well, if you pull the trigger, it's going to knock you over. So we had one small sergeant, female, come out and take the gun and go, ka-plunk, ka-plunk, ka-plunk. And all the macho guys said, well, if she can do it, then we can do it. So we got rid of the disenabling beliefs. And then we installed a set of enabling beliefs. And then the next thing we knew is that what do you need to do to be an expert marksman? So I've got a book at home, 400 pages, by a Russian that's generally regarded to be the definitive book on marksmanship in all the world. This is the Bible. But all of marksmanship can be summed up in one sentence. One sentence. You don't need 400 pages. The one sentence is simple. Align the sights on the target and discharge the round so as not to disturb the sight alignment. If you can do that, you'll be an expert shot. It's not that complicated. So what do you got to do? So you got to be able to isolate the trigger finger, and you got to be able to align the sights on the target. So how do you align the sights on the target? So in a standard pistol, you've got a U post at the back, and you've got a post in the front, and you're trying to make sure the distance that the post is right in the middle between the two, and that the height of it is the same height. So now then, you can try to eyeball it and try to estimate while you're holding it out there, and estimate, well, okay, is it the same on one side and the other? Is the height while your hand is wiggling around and moving? And that's not the way the experts do it. The experts have got a picture in their head of what perfect sight alignment looks like. And they're simply comparing the picture in their head to what they're looking at. And when they match, then you squeeze the trigger. Now, where do you get a picture of perfect sight alignment? You don't come born with a picture of perfect sight alignment. So we made a picture of perfect sight alignment, and we had them memorize it. So when they woke up in the morning, it was on the top of their bunk. When they went into the toilet, it was sitting in the toilet. It was on the mirror. They went to breakfast, it was sitting there beside their plate. And so they burned that picture into their head. So they had the picture of perfect sight alignment. And once they did that, then all they had to do was compare what they were looking at to that picture, and when they matched, then squeeze the trigger. And there were some ways to squeeze the trigger, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but I'm just using this as an example then of what's involved in modeling what people actually do. So the Army normally takes 4 days to put people through the basic pistol marksmanship training. And the training we did took 2 days, and took about a third of as much ammunition as in the normal training. And we were able to produce a higher number of, we were able to qualify everybody, whereas the standard Army course, they would qualify about 9 out of 12 the first time. We qualified everybody in 2 days, and we we qualified them at a higher level. So we were able to produce experts. About 25% of the people that we qualified at an expert level, whereas in a normal course, probably hardly anybody would. We elicited the model of how to do this, and I installed the model in myself and went out and took the standard Army marksmanship qualification training course, and using the model I'd installed in myself, I was able to shoot 20 points higher than expert. So I knew that it worked, and it did work. We had one lady in the training that had never held a gun in her hand in her entire life. She qualified expert at the end of 8 hours of instruction. And we asked her, "How did you do it?" And she said, "All I did was exactly what you told me. All I did was exactly what you told me." Now, we had 2 people that we weren't able to qualify to the afternoon of the second day. And they were the only 2 people that had shot a gun previously. So the primary lesson here is it's more difficult to unlearn than to learn. Unlearning is a very difficult process. So learn it right the first time. And this is a general principle for your children or in learning anything. Learn it right the first time. Unlearning is very, very difficult. So we learned this lesson then on the pistol marksmanship. Then we thought, well, okay, now we've got pistols, let's go to rifles. So we modeled some of the top rifle shooters in the Army, and we put together a rifle marksmanship. But in this case, we couldn't teach the course. We had to get the drill sergeants to be able to teach the course. So we taught them to teach the course. And they then proceeded to teach the course that we had designed, and they got the highest score ever received in the marksmanship training at Fort Benning. It was like 3 standard deviations beyond the average score that they had. So proved once again that this process worked by figuring out how the experts did what they did and then transferring that ability to other people. So that's one example of modeling and some of the results it can produce.